Hey everyone. Remember when tech used to fight the good fight? They were the good guys. You're watching Tech Strong Gang. Hi everyone. Happy Monday. It's Alan Shimel. Guys, I am glad to be home, if only for a day. It was cold in Atlanta. And it was also really bad Wi-Fi at that conference. It was hard. It was hard maneuvering and working, but it was a great KubeCon. I've written about it. We spoke about it all last week on our gangs. You can check it out. But we're back here in studio, and we've got a great lineup of our gang members to talk about some good stuff. Let me introduce you. We have a DevOps Dozen finalist, Garima Bajpai, a security analyst, Jack Poller, an analyst who's finding her next career or her next joy in life, our friend Camberley Bates. Would that make you like a recovering analyst, Camberley?
Yeah.
A recovering analyst.
It's AA.
There's hope. That's good to know.
Yeah,
There's hope.
And then two more analysts who are always with us, the one and only Mitch Ashley and Currier. Guys, how are you?
Good.
So, I don't know. Maybe it was the kumbaya of the open source movement and the idea of doing things for the common good that got me. Or maybe I'm just tired of seeing the pigs feed at the trough. But I did a Shimmy Says, an .it article and a LinkedIn article last week on this idea of, tech used to be the good guys. Even in the movies, right? You go to the Avengers. I'm Iron Man, right? He was a good guy. He was fighting crime, fighting the good fight. To me, that's what Elon Musk should be aspiring to be, right? Or any of these tech mogul, tech bro billionaires that we have kind of in place today. But that's not the tech we get today, right? Increasingly, it's a selfish, kind of egotistical, egomaniacal, if you will, kind of driven industry. We don't have any numbers because the government's not releasing any numbers, but stories, garnered from like employer records and, some of the big PEOs and stuff say that we might have lost maybe 35,000 more tech jobs last month alone. Things aren't so great in tech, in spite of the fact that we're spending record money building data centers and this AI thing. And increasingly people are recognizing, and we'll talk about it later, we might be in an AI bubble, who knows? But Mitch, Guy, Camberley, Jack, Garima, we've all been in tech collectively. There's 100 years, maybe 200 years worth of tech experience here. Are we not the good guys anymore? Or were we ever? Maybe we were never the good guys.
What first came to mind, we've all had people that we've admired over the years, whether you like Steve Jobs or whoever it might be, right? Alan Kay is a researcher. I think we're in the Gordon Gekko phase of tech leaders. Like, where's my freaking $1 trillion?
Greed is good.
Yeah, exactly. For my bonus. And, I think for a while, Elon Musk was held up as, someone that's admirable because of cool things that he was doing with space and Tesla, things like that. Now he's just kind of another one of the greedy people on the block and doing side deals with everybody and, forcing what he wants out of his board, just to pick on one. But I don't know if we were ever really truly, tech were the good guys necessarily. I'm not saying we're the bad guys, but I think we had people that we admired and we held up as Whether role models or not, I don't know, but people that we just admired a great deal because of what they did for the industry and their leadership in the industry. That's what I think we're missing.
So I'm going to be the contrary here a little bit because the first thing that came to mind is that when I joined IBM way back when, and I represent at least a quarter of the years that you talked about here. um,
No, you don't. We're all your age.
close to it,
I was
close to
gonna
a
say
quarter
the
of the
three
years.
of us make
We
up
were under
3
antitrust investigation, and they were about to get split up into three. And there was a reason why they were doing that, is because IBM was not playing nice. We were wrapping up the things, the big, the Burroughs, the Honeywells, that kind of stuff. We were screaming over them. I mean, and then I started thinking about, Tom Watson, he had his entire desk dropped in the front yard at NCR when he worked for them. That was not exactly very nice either. And then you add okay, 1998. I was looking this up. Microsoft versus a Mosaic Netscape. You had 20 states going after Bill Gates. Bill Gates is saying, crush him. Just crush him. He was really nice back then. Now he's like a really good, nice little woke guy. And it's like, oh, baloney. Sorry, I almost went the other way. And then I'm going to add one more to my favorites is Uncle Larry. Take no prisoner, Mr. Larry Ellison kind of guy. I mean, he's been dropping off people every quarter.
I think it's Grandpa Larry by now.
He's Grandpa
Camberley,
Larry,
sorry.
Uncle Larry, whatever.
No, it's Media Mogul Larry.
Media Mogul Larry, whatever. I mean, every quarter he wipes out a percentage of his people there, and that's been going on forever. And he just never has to publish it because he does it every quarter. The same way that the guy at GE did it. It's the same kind of principle. So and I think what happened is that we went, and then I'll shut up after this. We went through this period where everybody was like, let's be nice, let's be sweet, let's be okay. And now we're back into let's go compete. And that's where we're at. And I embrace it. I embrace the competition. And that's
I don't. I'm gonna let's let everyone else talk before I jump back in. But thoughts from the rest of the team?
I will say that I'm on Camberley's side, and having been both at IBM around the same times, and then at Netscape during that time, and my new employee orientation at Netscape was a speech by our now venerable VC Mark Andreessen, who said, Netscape earns $70 million a year from ad sales on our homepage because nobody ever changes the homepage. And so we're suing Microsoft over the browser to protect that revenue. That was all it was about, right? Is protecting that revenue. It had nothing else to do with anything else. And they sued Microsoft just because they could. And when I did an IETF meeting where we were discussing TLS, the TLS specs. And we had two coalitions, the pro-Microsoft coalition and the anti-Microsoft coalition. And we spent most of the time figuring out what Microsoft wanted and trying to design the protocol to make it more difficult for Microsoft.
Well,
and
Windows
that was
ain't
at the
done till notes
low-level
don't run.
engineering level. I'm sorry?
Windows ain't done till notes don't run, right? That was the old thing at Microsoft back then with notes, because the 1, 2, 3 was killing Excel. But guys, you're missing, I think you're missing my point with all due respect. To quote the infamous Don Barzini from Godfather, after all, we are not communists, right? There's nothing the matter with making a profit. There's nothing the matter with competing. Good old American competition. May the best person and company and product win. There's nothing the matter with using the law to your advantage. This is how the rules of the game are played. And that's great. That's America. That's capitalism. That's market forces at work. Don't fool yourselves into thinking that's what's going on here. What we have here is what we call collusion. What we have here is Uncle Larry is in bed with young Sam. And young Sam, as soon as he gets out of bed with Uncle Larry, runs over to whether it's the Microsoft or Google guy and does his little jig there. And they pass money around this virtuous circle of the 8 or 9 of them. creating barriers to entry for the two guys, for the next Woz and Jobs sitting in a garage working on something, or anyone else who wants to come in here.
So
Right?
how is that so much different than what was going on in Sand Hill with the VCs? I mean, that the VCs are just rolling doors of your, it kind of goes back to New York when you had the Morgans and all the people back in whatever years it was, and those were the people that socialized with each other, and that's the same way it is right now today with the tech guys.
But not at this level. And then I'll tell you what else is the big difference. They've got a new partner in the circle who's taking a piece of the action, right? The federal government. The federal government used to, and the court system used to be the arbiter, the guys who made sure, at least, even if it wasn't real, at least the facade was Horatio Alger, work hard and you'll get ahead. Now they got their thumb on the scale too.
I feel like the discussion here has shifted because my take on your take, Alan.
My take on your
Was that
take
it?
on your take. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and how you summarize it here, and in your Shimmy says, and how you summarize it here, was you were talking about tech to benefit the world. Tech used to be the good guys to benefit the world. Now it's the bad guys to benefit these 9 people. That's what I thought you were talking about.
It is. And you're right, Guy. I shame on me for not mentioning that too. I think there was sort of this altruistic of we're changing the world with tech, right? Tech is the great kind of equalizer. We're going to get women and other underrepresented groups, working in it. And, and Camberley, look, I'm not saying anything bad or I don't hold it against me, but you came up in a time when it was really hard for a woman too. No, you don't think it was hard for you?
I'm one of those contrary people on it. I didn't hit the walls like I felt like, other people talk about. Just either that or I just ignored it. It was
God bless you and good for you.
Clueless. I was probably just clueless to it. It just kind
oblivious to the whole thing. Just do your job. Garima, what about you? Do you feel like?
Yeah, I think you made the point very clear in the beginning that, tech for good, tech for communities. And I represent community and community leadership here. So I would say that, with all this, what you wrote, what are the repercussions happening? It's fear, it's disengagement, it's normalizing corruption, stifled creativity. And what happens when it goes to the peak? Communities, strike back. And this is what will happen. And I will give you an optimistic view on this because I think you mentioned about open source movement. I come from that open source. I am the child from the open source movement, the communities, and I feel that it's time for us to kind of ensure that something what happened in the 1980s with Linux taking the power back, right, with community and open source trying to kind of steer the needle in the right direction. I am more optimistic with leadership and the communities, and history reminds us what happened with DevOps. All those tools, capabilities, this Kubernetes movement, how did it got started? It's massive right now. So I'm more optimistic. It's just a matter of time. I mean, you cannot stifle innovation and adaptability on the name of egg diplomacy. And this, it's just, how we see it today and what can happen when community comes back and tries to take charge of it.
Amen. I think I'm quite optimistic about this development that I think you pretty accurately described, Alan. I kind of agree with everybody here, which is really weird. So I think the fundamental issue here, is that there's tech and there's science, and they are very well linked together. The science brings the discoveries like the original invention of the semiconductor that enables the tech, namely, information technology. Scientists are pursuing knowledge, truth, betterment as a general rule. Yes, they have, businesses as well, and they do commercial things, but that's the general culture there. We're going to see that this week. I'm attending Supercompute, which is one of the great fusions in the world of science and technology. Technology or tech, that's a business like you described. And I think that we are reverting to the mean of understanding that the business is in the business of its own business and profit, and science remains the pursuit of knowledge fundamentally. And all that happened was, probably led by Jobs, was this idea, Steve Jobs, was this idea that there's an altruism. I mean, that's one of the things I despise about the whole Silicon Valley culture, is how this new platform and gizmo that I've invented is what's going to bring peace to the Middle East and extend lifespans by 10 years and all this other kind of garbage that helps the VCs get all excited and the money flow, but it's really just garbage. And so if we're going to finally start recognizing them for what they're trying to do, which is to make themselves rich and get their trillion, then, great, because that's what they've been doing all along. They've just been papering it over with this idea that tech is also in the business of the common good. And it's the science that's in the business of the common good more than the tech.
But as you started off with, they're intrinsically linked, right?
That's the tension. So it's always been there. But, it's kind of like adopting this idea that this innovation, which is the word usually used, this new widget, is like a scientific pursuit for the good of all. And it's not. It's not. It's the new widget that benefits from the science. We're seeing that in AI right now.
You've hit it right on, which is that we in the Silicon Valley and the Silicon Valley tech leaders have put a fig leaf of altruistic respectability on top of what they do, because, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but this is history repeating itself over and over and over again. If you just look at the printing press, when the printing press was invented, I don't know if it was created for altruistic ideals, but it had a very, it ushered in the Age of Enlightenment, where, in the education and the explosion of knowledge throughout the world. But then if you look many years later, we had a closing down of information availability, and our knowledge and media was controlled by 3 corporations in the United States for a very long time. And before that, it was controlled by William Randolph Hearst and the newspaper barons. And the explosion of the internet was what freed information out. And now we can get news from a gazillion different channels.
Look how much better off we are.
Yeah, but it's a cycle that repeats itself, right? So, I understand your frustration, Alan, but I think it's a little bit naive to think, oh my God, that this is different.
Maybe it's naive.
Right?
Let me ask you a question. Do you think Hearst was a good guy for what he did?
None of these people are good guys.
They had good
features
and bad features.
Forever.
I mean, what are your opinion of
beside the point.
Let me just tell you, hear me out. Their name by itself, don't let it prejudice your thought, but the robber barons. They're called robber barons.
Do you think Getty was a good guy? How about Mellon?
Yeah,
Mellon was one of the robber barons.
We have a reason why we have antitrust laws.
Exactly. How about it's the reason we used to have antitrust laws.
But
and then after they make all this money, then they do this thing, this foundation, and start giving away zillions of money.
Or build universities. My alma mater was Carnegie Mellon.
There you go.
Carnegie Mellon University, right? It was funded by the robber barons.
Or fund that building at the university or whatever. Put my name on it. It's like.
Yeah, we've shifted from, we don't call them, I was thinking the same thing, robber baron. We call them titans now, right? So,
no, I still call them robber barons, Mitch.
No, Some
of Benioff and Mark Benioff, who's the billionaire who does Salesforce, right? He's single-handedly funded a huge amount of the UCSF children's hospitals, and Ken Langone, who did Home Depot, is the Langone Cancer Center in New York, which is very good at treating cancer patients. I mean, those billions of dollars that they've created have not gone entirely to gold toilets and lavish dinners and Larry Ellison's yachts. Yeah, he does have a yacht, but he also employed a couple thousand
After
people
all
to
of
build that
those,
yacht.
after the gold toilets and the lavish dinners and all that other sort of stuff, there's some money left over for cancer. That's great. I'm a capitalist. I'm not trying to critique the entire system. I'm more focused on this idea that tech and the tech industry does do good. It should be, we benefit from it, but expecting brands and companies, what I like, what makes me optimistic is that I feel this cultural shift that you're detecting, Alan, where we stop believing when the next Google has their version of don't do evil, that we just stop believing that. It's beside the point. It's marketing. And if the marketing stops working, we don't have to put up with it anymore.
Well, I think we could learn from others not in tech. I'm going to represent my home state. I admire Oracle, not Larry Ellison Oracle, but the Oracle of Omaha.
Was he from Western Nebraska?
Western Omaha.
Okay.
Yes.
There's a little more Nebraska west of Western Omaha.
That was a joke that we had.
No, we were talking about that in QCon. Mitch says he's from Western Nebraska.
Warren Buffett, you talk about somebody who's made people a lot of money, including himself and his investors. But, that's someone who he had an attitude of not only philosophy investing, but about, because it's America, we're going to do it this way, right? We're going to invest in the things that Americans are going to need, whether it's the railroads here or candy that's sold in the airports here, or utilities, he was looking at, it didn't matter if it was tech or not. He wasn't a big tech investor, but he was looking out as what does the economy need? Where is it heading? And how can you position yourself to be at that place when, when the puck is sent that direction? And you don't have to be the greedy bastard, I'll use the word, who only cares about having the most money compared to all the other greedy bastards. And that's kind of that's the environment, whether you're talking about tech titans or you're talking about robber barons, that was all competition amongst each other, trying to either take the other person out or having the most stuff, right? You don't have to do that.
He certainly, he's on a pedestal above these other folks in terms of this. Here's my point on it. It's okay. It's okay if that's what you want to be, right? But I think we all have to recognize that unfettered market economics, unfettered capitalism without some restraint is not good for the everyman, is not good for the gen pop, right? However, neither is some sort of socialistic, communistic thing where, we cut all the corn at the same height so no one has more than anyone else. Our country has thrived historically as a mix, right? We do have market forces that shape our economy and shape our daily lives. But the idea is that through lessons we've learned from the Gilded Age, again, they call the robber baron age the Gilded Age, right? Through lessons we've learned through the Depression from the Taft-Hartley Act and what that wrought. Through all of these, historical things, we've come to say, hey, we need a balance. There has to be a balance. There has to be it can't just be I buy my way in. I settle my $100 million lawsuit by giving you $25 million and you wink, wink, and let me do whatever I want. It can't, in order for our system to work right, we all, or most of us, have to believe that there's some sort of level playing field, that we have a shot at the brass ring, that hard work, ingenuity, and smarts are rewarded. It's not stacked up by some old boys game, sitting back in the parlor. And all I'm saying is that it seemed like that's where we were for a while, right? Camberley, to your point, IBM was on the verge of getting broken up. Ma Bell did get broken up, right? Microsoft got hit hard, some might say, for what they did with the browsers and Windows and everything else. I don't think that's America today. I don't think, and because the other thing I think about it, and we'll talk about it in another segment, is because we have made tech a strategic national imperative and we've weaponized it. We're weaponizing it against our perceived enemies. But we can talk about that on another segment of the gang. We got to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about AI anxiety on Wall Street. You're watching Tech Strong, gang.
You've earned it. The spotlight, the responsibility, the weight of teams, companies, and entire industries fall on your shoulders. Lives depend on your decisions, your home life included. At work, you're protected, physically and digitally. Nothing gets through your team without a fight. But in a globally connected world, everyone sees you, including those who mean to cause you and your organization harm. And now home, your sanctuary. Attackers see an opportunity. Your digital front door is wide open. And what compromises your home can breach your boardroom. Because the devil's greatest trick isn't targeting your workplace firewall. It's convincing you that your personal life isn't at risk. Black Cloak. Digital executive protection, defending the new attack surface. Your personal life.
Hey everyone, we're back. Wow, that was quite a discussion. It's almost a continuation of this though, but maybe our friends down on Wall Street are feeling a little of this. We used to fight the good fight too, and they're getting a little shaky and nervous. Mitch, what do you think?
Well, everybody is talking about the AI bubble. Doesn't know whether you know anything about AI or not, right? It's common. Like, are we on the cusp of having a big correction, right? Over 2%, 2 to 3% correction. And everybody's anticipating that. And I think almost that looking for it causes it to happen. I mean, we're recording this on Friday, and at open, the market's down 400 to 500 points. And there's lots of reason for it, but NVIDIA got hit yesterday, dropped in its value, and think as if we keep on this kind of roller coaster, things will be pushed back up, and then something will draw it down. I think we're at a place of saying, is AI real, and how much have we over rotated, if we've over rotated, in investment in data centers and chips and stocks. In anticipation of AI, or is it real? Is it going to deliver the value, and those investments are worth it? And if history does repeat itself, we've over invested in data centers before in the cloud, early in the cloud era, and we've over invested in other things too. So it's not unheard of. I think that concern is real, but what's also bolstering it is the job layoffs that don't get reported by the government now, but especially in the tech industry. And so I think people are concerned. It's a time of uncertainty about where this is headed, and as the financial stability of the country or ourselves, frankly. You could argue that's what some of the results of the election, mid-year election showed. So midterm election.
So Mitch, you said when that we sort of look for it and that's causing it. And I think that, I did a Camberley thing, and I actually looked this up. December 5th, 1996, Alan Greenspan gave a speech to the American Enterprise Institute and coined the term irrational exuberance. And I think what we're doing is not looking for it, but recognizing it now before it becomes really irrational, and saying, something doesn't smell right here. So, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but I believe I heard that OpenAI has made commitments for $1 trillion in capital expenditure spend, with something like $30 million in revenue, right? Or 30 billion,
20 billion. They're expecting 20 billion.
20 billion in revenue, right? So that's just such an
Jack, I think it was
unbalanced
only
equation.
800 billion, not $1 trillion.
But that's amongst friends.
I mean, come on, but it's just so unbalanced. It's like, these are unreal numbers. That how does anybody make a commitment to spend that much when they have the capacity to pay it back is just absolutely non-existent?
Yeah, and that's
the irrational
Jack,
exuberance we're recognizing.
Jack, I just got to quibble with you saying that it's not irrational. maybe I'm being too technical. Irrational meaning divorced from rationality. What people are spending is based on what the market's at right now, but it's not a rational amount. It's based on it's based on their vibe, that this is super important. And so in this capitalist, system that we have that we were talking about on the last segment, people pay what they think they should pay, but they don't have a clear idea of what the return is going to be. And I don't have the numbers in front of me. There have been recent studies or recent looks at this sort of thing from analysts far more qualified for that than I am, saying something like, the best return we can expect is something like 20% on the level of investment in AI right now. And that's just a fact of the people paying the market rate for stuff without having a clear idea of what the return is going to be. So that's irrational.
I think the irrational
No,
part of it is,
I'm sorry. Real quickly, Mitch, I believe it's irrational. I'm just saying we're recognizing it very early in the cycle rather than when everything has already collapsed because of it.
yeah, I think what I would take exception to what you're saying is the irrational part of it is continuing to doing what we're doing, knowing that some of this doesn't make sense. Why is pets.com go to an IPO in the late 90s for some ridiculous, absurd amount, right? That's irrational, even though it happened, even though people made decisions that helped that happen. And that's the question: are we in that place now? Is the overextension of commitments around, is the buying of business that's happening by co-investing across companies, is that causing, an overextension in the market and what things are really worth? And the answer is probably yes. And there'll be a correction, and that's what happens. And,
So, the thing I've learned about bubbles over the years, I'm gonna quote the great sage Bobby Bacala, Tony Soprano's right-hand man.
Where's the Godfather, man? Okay, go ahead.
Tony once asked Bobby, do you think you feel it when they come and hit you, when you get shot? And Bobby says, you probably don't even see it coming. You probably don't even see it coming. Most bubbles, last week we were touting here how great this was and let the good times roll, baby. And then before you know it, that's how quick these bubbles burst. You don't even feel it. You don't even see it coming. You don't feel it. And then it's here. Is this that moment? I wish I knew. I would be out with Warren Buffett somewhere taking it easy, but I'm not. I'm here working. But I think what we're all saying is we do realize there's a little irrational exuberance here. There might be a payoff down the road, but the way our market, back in the day, Wall Street was ruled by institutional money. It was big, rich people or big companies, institutions that moved stock. Today's Wall Street, 40% of your equity business is retail. It's people like us. Not that we're Warren Buffett or anything, but it's small-time people like us. And generally, the law of the herd plays into these things. And that might be what we're seeing here, right? Where, what they always say, follow the smart money. Who the hell, if I knew where the smart money was, I wouldn't be here still too. But, that's what they say, follow the smart money. Camberley, I know you had written some.
No, my only comment is I'm welcoming a correction right now. I think it's, to my personal opinion, is not that I'm I'm not a really good investor or whatever. I hand it over to some other people to take care of that stuff. But I believe that we are over. We're over our heel, over our skis right now. And when you look at the valuations, and I think we need a correction. And I'd like to see the heat coming out of the market. And hopefully that's what's happening right now. So it's like, let's get some of the heat out. And maybe it won't explode if we do that.
Absolutely. I mean, and the other thing is, hindsight is always 20/20, right? So Mitch, you go back to the pets.com era. Hey man, I helped take a company public in that time. We went public in early 2000, or maybe it was early 2000. January, February, you know, our Merrill Lynch was our lead, banker taking us out. We had the wonderful man, Henry Blodgett. Henry was our lead banker. Of course, Henry got in a little trouble because he was out touting stocks that he was then selling stocks. And we got wrapped up into that, right? We're not supposed to talk about it. I was told never to talk about it, but
Okay. all right.
I think the statute of limitations is run by now. It's 25 years. But anyway, we didn't, that's why pets.com and some of these, there was some abuses built into the system. We may find out 10 years from now, 5 years from now, that there are some irregularities, there are some, things that we needed to correct that would prevent these kinds of things. But I don't know if we ever prevent them totally. I think it's the herd. It's the law of the herd.
Right. I wanted to add something here because we have been talking about valuation fatigue for quite some time now. That is its real story, and that is happening, and the market correction is due to kind of in due course of time we will see that. But I think there are two technical repercussions of this. One is that the AI data center movement and the underperformance of the revenue, which is kind of coming through. And this is, again, showing up with what you see as a correction in the market. So there is no substantiated revenue as such to date for these AI data centers, and how it will play around. That's the first technical factor. The second technical factor, I would say that a multi-million-dollar revenue wiped out due to the geopolitical restrictions. So what will happen as a correction is probably, and I think there is some announcement today that there will be some corrections coming from a regulatory perspective, how this chip market would be normalized or harmonized, because if the market is reacting strongly to this is in making. So these are 2 points I would also like to make here.
I think the geopolitical thing, Garima, is huge. Camberley, you had sent something else out about some recent bill passed by the Senate.
Yeah, well, that's having to do with who's selling where and
Well,
holding
it's
back.
geopolitical, right? They're saying, hey, we're going to prioritize domestic customers over international customers. You see that during wartime. When I read what you said, Camberley, I'm saying, yeah, during wars, we've seen that sort of strategic kind of thing. In another time, in another place, would an Intel or an AMD or a NVIDIA say, hey, you can't tell if they're willing to pay more money, right? I'm not owned lock, stock, and barrel by the U.S. government here, right? And stuff like that. So there is, anytime you get a bubble burst and people lose money and get hurt, there's an outcry for regulation. It's just like a knee-jerk reaction, right? And I think we're going to see it here, assuming that this trend does stay the same. Anyway,
substantiating this point, like 95% of the revenue for NVIDIA from China is now zero.
Well, we've discussed this and we'll discuss it again. But I really got to take us on a break here, guys, because we're running late and we've got a third segment coming up. You're watching TechStrong, gang.
Discover TechStrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with TechStrong Group.
Hey, everyone. We're back here. into our C block. Thanks for staying with us. Our next segment is parsing processors. It seems no matter what we're talking about, inference and all of the things that could come up to displace GPUs, they are the ones present and future kings of the block, of the pile. This is coming out of some Futurum research. Camberley, you want to lead us off?
Sure. Futurum just put out a research report on the market shares of the different chips or GPUs out there. And of course, NVIDIA is at the top. But what is really great about the report that came out is seeing the other guys come out. And, why we see NVIDIA as the big kahuna here. AMD is coming up. You've got a whole bunch of other people. One of the ones that I picked up on that's up there is Grok. And I think that's because I just listened to a discussion about Humane, who is a big investment over there in Saudi Arabia, and their first data center is going to be based on Grok and then followed by AMD. So it's kind of like they started out with the other guys as opposed to the one that we see. But I think the other piece that you had brought up on this is, are these, how we're going at it, how this is going, it's gaining ground in the data centers. But where is this going in terms of investment and depreciation schedules, et cetera? Are we doing the right things in terms of reporting expenses, et cetera, that are out there in terms of the company? So anyway, I will turn it over to you guys to talk about this, next week is supercomputing. So you guys are going to be right front and center where all this stuff is at. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, this week, as this airs, it's starting this
sorry,
afternoon,
yes.
this evening. Yeah, because we're
Apologize,
airing on
Adam.
Monday.
Through the magic
No.
of quantum time dilation here at TechStrong Studios. Go ahead, Guy.
So it's not just competition with the kingpin of the GPU, NVIDIA. It's competition of against the GPU generally with other processing units, so-called XPUs, NPUs, neural processing units, TPUs, tensor processing units, PDQPUs, like whatever it is. This has been happening for a while. I think the market is just taking time to sort of catch up to this idea. So it starts with saying, which began in graphics, which is where the name comes from. It starts with saying that a central processing unit, a single processing unit, may not be enough for certain special applications. Even a GPU is you could even call it a generalized processing unit. It has a limited instruction set and a certain capability to it, which has been adapted very well to AI now, naturally. These other ones are even more specialized. What is not often talked about in general, even in really technical discussions, and this is where I'm saying like the market is still catching up to this, is how many advances in chip design there have been over the last 10 years. To be able to, more or less custom code a processor to do very specific things and then manufacture them very quickly, potentially at scale, inexpensively. It has to do with innovations in what's called packaging, meaning, used to just be one chip. Now that we have these giant chips, but we also have so-called chiplets where you can collect a bunch of chips, so it still looks like one chip. I don't want to bore everybody with all the examples of this, but it allows for something like a software development approach to what is a physical thing that gets plugged into a board, which also has, had innovations. But the market remains highly focused, and talking about technical buyers and such, remain highly focused on GPUs. And what the Futurum research report shows is not just is NVIDIA's dominance breaking, but the GPU's dominance may be starting to break as well. And this is really great. That's where efficiencies come from. That's where people, of course, now the software needs to be developed in parallel to take advantage of these things. That's the next wave.
I would also like to add something here. I mean, these are a couple of things. I wanted to highlight two things. The first problem with the report, which Camberley had mentioned, was that the valuation of these GPU investments or chip investments is skewed up, because if you actually have a life cycle of 2 to 3 years practically, but you are showing it in the books to 5 to 6 years, that means it's an inflated valuation. And there are certain bodies like IFRS and GAP who are regulating this. I think there is a substantial amount of speculation that how these assets would live that longer life, and of course what it means to innovation, right? I mean, there is a lot of like traction in how these chips are being developed. And to your point, Gay, that what happens is that we are seeing a surge of XPUs, right? And XPUs are like cost efficient and also energy efficient, so a substitution towards deep GPUs. But the market has speculations about it. It's not substantiated, what value it creates and all that, right? So, and how it will be adopted. So there is a twofold kind of movement going on, and we need to kind of watch out how this turns around and how it comes across, because the bigger problem is that this inflated valuation of the assets which we have in the data center, which will have repercussions that these innovations which we are talking about, XPUs and all this kind of open standards and software like approach to chips would be stifled. So this is the crux of how this would play around.
So I have a theory. Let me do this one, Mitch. I have a theory. This is the first generation, kind of the first wave we've seen of the AI GPU craze, and I call it the American Cadillac era. We use GPUs for everything. Anything you want to do something with AI, you need a GPU, right? Because we're overbuilding because we really haven't turned the dial enough to understand what we can get away with and where optimum is. We're still dialing in, is the word, right? I think as we go on, we're going to get better and say, hey, instead of the GPUs, the XPUs, all these other things are probably more efficient for the job that I needed to do. Not every job needs the GPU. And especially as we move more from training and more to inference, which is what everyone is saying, right? Our reliance on these Cadillacs, people are going to say, no, I could use a Chevy for this, or a Ford, or a Toyota, or whatever you want to call it. And I do think that's going to bring some rationality to the chip market.
There's some good data in the report, Alan, that backs up what you're saying, which is the primary driver around GPUs is the time to train models, the huge investment that goes. That's what drives the biggest purchase of those. But interestingly enough, the workload is starting to change of what people are using GPUs and other XPUs variations. So the kind of farther down in the report, if you kind of untuck some of the data, it talked about both training and inferencing was about 33% of the use cases, followed by mostly inferencing, which is also at 33% in the same 30 range. Training dominant was really only 19, and data prep, the data that we use is kind of a small 10%. But the point being is, it's not just a linear curve or a hockey stick all built around training. Yes, that's happening, and they want to drive the cost per token down for training and make it faster, but they also need to drive the cost per token down for inferencing and other use cases, and that's happening. So I think we're turning that curve that you're talking about.
It's
So Mitch,
hybrid infrastructure in making, right? I mean, if you see the XPU growth is 23% in 2026, that's the projected, value of the growth. And then you see how the hybrid infrastructure would also open up new opportunities for smaller players, right? So that's another thing which we should watch out for.
if I could make
And it's worth mentioning
Can I make-
also because Jack, it's just worth mentioning because KubeCon was last week, that DRA, which is one of these Kubernetes related projects, just went general availability in August. DRA, dynamic resource allocation, the name doesn't tell you so much what it does. It is a prime way for applications to get delivered these diverse compute resources whether GPU, XPU, or whatever. So the software is responding.
I think it's the next wave. But guys, we
If I-
got to run.
All right.
We try to keep these within
Oh,
a
sorry.
time frame.
Give Jack
That's
2
fine.
seconds.
Oh, I if I could just leave our audience with 3 thoughts, which is, I hate to be the historian here, but we've been through this before. I went through this with coprocessors and with the risk versus CIS scores. Second thought is, we do have a change in U.S. finance laws about how you can capitalize equipment. So we won't be seeing depreciation this year in the U.S., which will change how all of this reports at the end of the year. And the final thought is, despite having this wonderful list of processors that are available now, GPUs, XPUs, CPUs, etc., there are 2 fabs in the world that make these things. There's Intel and TSMC, and that's it. And that's going to be a very big issue next year.
And years to come, because they don't come on like quick. But speaking of quick, we've got to quickly end the show. Mitch, Guy, Camberley, Garima, Jack, thank you. Thank you for watching. We've got TechStrong TV following this. Check it out. But this is Alan Shimel. We're out.